Hey guys, this is Karan here. I live in Saudi Arabia, studying 10th grade in Yambo International School. Today in this section, we're talking about plant structure and its function. And I've presented, this is a unique design and I've put a lot of time and efforts in making this. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So the objectives are basically to describe three kinds of plant cell, explain the difference between the three plant tissue system, describe the main types of meristems, differentiate between monocot and dicot meristems, and differentiate between primary growth and secondary growth. So the first that comes across is specialized plant cell. Now all organisms are composed of cells, we know that. And the second point is that the pine trees or marigolds and plants all look different from one another, but they are made up of cells and similar cells and tissues. Okay, same with every person over here. They may look different, but still they're made up with same or similar cells and tissues. Okay, and plant cells have unique structures, including a central vacuole, and we learned about vacuoles and other things in our previous videos, but plastics and thick cell wall that surrounds the cell membrane. These common features are found in three types of specialized plant cells. So plants are made up of three types of cell and four types of tissue. The three basic types of cell are parenchyma, okay, and this is how you pronounce them over here. So parenchyma, parenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Okay, so the first one is that parenchyma is the most abundant and least structured specialized cell. The parenchyma cells are usually loosely packed cube-shaped or elongated cells that contain large central vacuole and have thin, flexible cell wall. So cells occurring throughout the plant and have many functions, including photosynthesis, food storage, as you guys can see, and general metabolism. Okay, the important characteristics of parenchyma cell is that they can divide and become specialized for various functions, and these cells can usually form the bulk of non-woody plants. For example, the fleshy part of an apple is made up mostly of parenchyma cells. Okay, the next one, collenchyma, is the plant cell that supports the growing part of cells right over here. Okay, so they might look similar from this one, both might look similar, but they are not similar. So there are different types of cells. So the cell walls of collenchyma cells are thicker than those of parenchyma cells. Collenchyma cells walls are also irregular shape, as you guys can see. They're just formed in random type of shapes. The thicker walls provide more support for the plants, as you guys can see. They are thick, of course. Now they have thick walls, which thick walls, stretchable cell walls that provide flexibility support. Okay, the collenchyma cells are usually grouped in strands, as you guys can see. Now they are specialized for supporting regions of the plant that are still lengthening. The tough string of ciliary stalks, which basically stems, are made up of collenchyma cells. Okay, so we come across last type of cell, and it's very peculiar than those of that we looked over here, because this might be round. Okay, this will buy it, and this is round as well. But if you see this is not round. It looks like some kind of mosquito or some kind of spider. Okay, so it supports the non-growing parts of the plant. So that is the reason why it has an irregular shapes. Okay, so peculiar type of shape. So sclerenchyma cells have thick, even rigid cell wall. They support and strengthen the plant in areas where growth is no longer occurring. So wherever these are located, there is no growth happening. So they have a thick, non-stretchable cell wall. So do you guys think that they are helpful? Put it down in the comment section below. So, and check your answers if they are right or wrong. So the cell walls are so thick that the cell usually dies at maturity, providing a frame to support the plant. Now, when they mature, most sclerotima cells are empty chambers surrounded by thick walls. Now, there are two types of sclerotima cells. The first one is fiber. Now, cells up to 50 centimeter long that usually occurs in strand. Basically, our fabrics such as linen and flax are made up of this type of fiber. And there's scale-threads, and they have thicker cell walls than fiber does, and have many shapes and can occur single or in a small groups. Now, this gritty structure of pear is from scale reeds, and scale reed contain and scale reed also cause the hardness of peach peat and a walnut shell. So plant tissue and its system. So the four basic plant tissue are vascular tissue, dermal tissue, ground tissue, and meristematic tissue. So here's some concept about dermal tissue system. So dermal tissue system is a form of the skin which basically is the outside covering of a plant, covering all parts of the root, stem, and leaves. Now, one kind of dermal tissue is the epidermis, and it's made up of parenchyma cells, which usually only one thick cell, and outer protective tissue for young plants and mature non-woody plants. Okay, so you guys can read the other details right here, but these are just some above the ground details and below the ground details and details along those lines. So the main concept basically is located in one the 3 points, and it's depending on the location on the plant. Okay, so this is it for the dermal tissue. Now we come across the ground tissue system. So dermal tissue surrounds the ground tissue system, which consists of all three types of plant cells. Now, ground tissue consists of everything that is not dermal tissue or vascular tissue. Parenchyma, a simple tissue, makes up most of the ground tissue. Now, ground tissue has many metabolic functions, which basically include photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is the main one because it's the one which makes the plants producers. So, food storage and support. Now, you guys can read the last point, which basically says non-woody root, stems, and leaves are made up of primarily of ground tissue, but that's not really important detail. The important detail are located in first 3 again. So let's go ahead and talk about the vascular tissue system. Now, it is specialized tissue called vascular tissue, and it carries water and nutrients throughout the whole plant and helps support the plant. So they help support the branch of the plant so they don't just fall off. Okay, now there's two types of vascular tissue. Both types of vascular tissue contain specialized conducting cells. So the first type is xylem. Okay, xylem. So it moves water and minerals upward from roots to leaves. So when the water and minerals are absorbed by the roots of plants, these substances must be transported up the plant system and leaves. Now that xylem is the tissue that carries water and dissolves substances upward in the plant. The second one is phloem, which basically moves sugar or saps in both directions throughout the plant or originating in the leaves. Now, sugar are basically made in the leaves of the plant by photosynthesis. Okay, it must be transported throughout the plant so whole plants get the energy to survive. So the phloem tissue conducts sugar upwards and downwards in the plant. So the growth in meristems. Now there's 4 points listed, and I have listed a table over here, which okay. So here the plant are growing. We're still talking about the growth, right? So the plant grow differently from animals. Instead of growing only for limited time, plant grow as long as the plant is alive. So this is something that you might not know. So it's an interesting point. But instead of occurring throughout the organism, plant growth occurs only in specific growing region. Okay? Now, this is some extra things that you can pause and read by yourself. Now, we said that all new cells are all alike at first, but eventually they change, differentiate into vascular tissue, dermal tissues, and ground tissues. We already concluded that. So here I've given a diagram, and since it had a figure right here that is contained in 31.2, which is the table in my textbook, so I've took a picture from my textbook, and given this picture I've just put it in the PowerPoint presentation and made it as beautiful as I can. So this is some apical meristem and intercalary meristem and lateral meristems. Now there is some locations over here, but basically if you just look at the figure I've conducted, you get the whole idea of it. Okay, so there is a CORK cambium, okay, and the vascular cambium located between the xylem and phloem produces additional vascular tissue. The CORK cambium located outside the phloem produce CORK. Now CORK cells replace the epidermis in the woody system and roots, protecting the plant. Now CORK cells are dead cells that provide protection and prevent water loss. Now there's two patterns of growth in the seed plant. The first one is primary growth and second one is secondary growth, like we talked about it in starting off the section. So what is a primary growth? Well, the elongated growth in the length of stem and roots is called primary growth. Now all plants exhibit primary growth it occurs where plants grow taller and their roots grow deeper. Now the secondary growth, the growth that makes the plant thicker, okay, growth in the diameter is called secondary growth. Some seed plants have secondary growth. In woody plants there is a lateral meristem between the xylem and phloem called the vascular cambium that produces additional vascular tissue. So this is for primary growth and secondary growth. Now we come across the roots. Now plants have three kinds of organs: roots, stems, and leaves. Now roots are the structure that typically grow underground. Roots are important because the anchor of the cell in soil. They absorb and transport water and mineral nutrients. The storage of water and organic compound is provided by the roots. So this is the reason why roots is important for the plant. Now the objective is again to list three major functions of roots, since we now come across the roots, and explain the difference between a taproot system and a fibrous root system, and then distinguish between primary growth and secondary growth in system, a root, and describe primary root tissues. So types of roots. Okay, the first root to emerge from seed is primary root. Now, as you guys can see in the picture, as the plant matures, the branches grow from the primary root. Now, in some cases, the primary root enlarges. If this first root becomes the largest root, it is called the taproot. So the taproot, as you guys can see in the figure over here, and this is the taproot. Now, since the carrots are being grown, it's known and it's being largest root of all, it's called the taproot. Now, taproots can grow and develop, reaching water far below the surface of the ground. Now, the beets and carrots are plants with taproots that are used for food. Okay, so we eat carrot. We just wipe out this mud out and wash them carefully so no bacteria or dirt are on them, and we can eat the carrot or beets that grow underground, which is the whole function why roots are important to us. Okay, so as you guys can see, not all plants have taproots, especially monocots, which is basically such as grasses. Now, if you just went to a garden and plucked out grasses, you would find something, some figure like this. But you cannot find a food under them because not all plants have taproots, especially monocots like grasses, like we mentioned, and the roots are numerous and all about the same size. Okay, so numerous extensively branched roots are called fibrous roots, and these roots grow near the surface and can collect water in wide area. Because of all these numerous branches of roots, these plants are excellent for preventing erosions in grasses. Okay, so this is why they are helpful here. Now, fibrous root of monocots often develop from the base of the stem rather than just the other roots, as you guys can see in the figure over here. Now, the few plants have have special roots called adventitious roots and roots that form on a stem or leaf. Now, some grow above ground and have some special functions such as corn prop roots, which help us support in the plant. Now, there's something also called an air root of orchids, like obtain water and mineral nutrients from the air. Now, air roots on the stem of a ivy and other vine enable stem to climb walls and trees, as shown in figure 31.4 right here. Okay, so I've labeled some xylem, phloem, and other endodermis, root hair, over in this diagram over here, and just a little description about them along this side. Now you can pause this and read the description by yourself and understand the whole concept of root hair, endodermis, and pericycle. Okay, which is basically formed by the division of pericycle cells. So here you have water and minerals move into the root along the two pathways, and here's the diagram showing it. Okay, so yeah, this is the root hair, as you guys can see, and the water is going past through them, and when the so this is the waterproof seal and endodermal seal, and water is passing through this over here. Okay, so we come across stems, and in contrast to roots, which are mainly adapted for the absorption and anchoring, the stems are adapted to support leaves. Now, whatever size they come in and shape, stems also function in transporting and providing storage. So, talking about stems, let's go ahead and talk about some objectives that we'll discuss. Now, the objective is to describe the difference between monocot stem and dicot stem, and list 5 differences and 5 similarities between structures of roots and the structure of stems. Now explain how annual ring are formed, then describe the pressure flow model for organic compound movement in the phloem, and describe the cohesion tension theory for water movement in the xylem. So the stem have 2 main functions, like we said. The first is to hold leaves up to the sunlight so they can have the process called the photosynthesis, which makes the plant producers. And the second one is the transporting water and food between roots and leaves. So stem structure. So we have all seen the stem over here, and this is the stem right here. This is the leaves, roots over here. So there's a description about stem structures given over here in this presentation, and you can pause the video and read about them. Okay? Now, primary growth in stems. Well, basically, the vascular tissue is continuous between roots and stems. Now, the arrangement for vascular tissue is different in stems than in roots. So, in roots, vascular tissue is a central cylinder. As you guys can see, it's round in circle right here, approximately it's round. And in stems, the vascular is round and vascular bundle, which contain both zyme, which is towards the inside, and phloem towards the outside, as shown in the figure right here. Now, secondary growth in the stems is basically the stem increases in thickness due to the division of cells in vascular cambium, and we learned that right just a moment ago. And the vascular cambium is the dicot and gymnosperm stems first arises between xylem and the phloem in vascular bundle. Okay, so the vascular cambium forms a cylinder and produces secondary xylem to produce inside secondary phloem to the outside. And we learned this whole concept just before this right here. Towards the inside, towards the outside. And it usually produces more xylem than it does in the secondary form. Now the secondary xylem is also called the wood. Okay? So you have heartwood, sapwood, and over here. So this part over here is called sapwood. The outside is called bark, and the inside, very inside, is called heartwood. Okay. Now this is just summary of this whole thing. Now sapwood, you can read the description over here, but it's something similar. So let's say you have a wood over here. You cut the wood out. Okay. So when you cut the wood out, you basically end up with a piece over here. Now a piece basically has three types of thing in it. Now the piece, when it's mature woody system, the system when it's mature, you basically see a piece like this. The outside part is really rough, which is known as bark. The inside part, when you where the starch is stored, is called the sapwood. So when you put the iodine in it, it changes the whole color. So you can see the starch is present, and heartwood, which is located over here. Now if you put that in microscope, you basically see the xylem, cork, and phloem, and the pith. Okay? And this is the growth ring over here, in which somewhere there. So here's some function that we learned, and I put them in the bulletin points so you guys can read by yourself and understand the concept. Okay, and this 2 points over here, I think they're the new points. I got them, and I could summarize the best I could possibly. Okay, and here the movement of sugars in phloem is best explained by the pressure flow. Now everything, so the hypothesis, okay, so the movement, like I said, what happens first is that sugars are actively transporting from source cell into sieve tube. Okay, this is called the sieve tube over here. Sieve tubes. Now, because of high sugar concentration in the phloem, the hydrogen oxide diffuses into the sieve tubes element, rising to the hydrogen oxide pressure. You guys can see goes down because of hydrogen oxide pressure, and the pressure causes the sap sugar to water to flow through the phloem. Okay, and the sugar are transported out to the phloem into zinc cells. Water diffuses into the xylem, reducing the hydrogen oxide pressure in the phloem. So we come across the transportation of water, and the transportation of water and mineral nutrients occur in the xylem of all plants and organisms. Now, the theory of water movement in plants today is known as cohesion tension theory. So another name you can think of cohesion tension theory is theory of water movements in plants. Okay, now transpiration is basically a water movement in plants which is driven. Okay, now transpiration is the evaporation of water from the parts of plants exposed to the air. As the water evaporates from the cell of leaf or stem replacement, water is pulled from the xylem tissue. More than water enters the roots from the soil to replace the lost water. Okay, so now we have the fifth point which we come across. Now the evaporation from water from the cells creates a negative pressure in the xylem, which pulls water upwards, and it's very bad because as we see, the water is going down over here. Okay, so instead of pulling up or downwards, it's pulling upwards. So that's a negative effect, negative pressure. Now, transpiration creates a strong pull, but another force also helps water pull up a plant is called cohesion. Now, cohesion causes water molecules to stick together and pull each other up inside the narrow tube of xylem. Now, the movements of also depends on rigid xylem walls and the strong attraction of water molecules to xylem wall, which is also called adhesion. And as you guys can notice, if you search up the word cohesion and adhesion, they both are opposite to each other. So leaves. Now most leaves are thin and flat, an adaptation that helps them capture sunlight for photosynthesis. Although this structure may be typical, it is certainly not universal. Like roots and stem, leaves are extremely variable. So this variation represents adaptation in environmental conditions. So these are some objectives that we'll go through. And the leaf structures and types. The types of leaves are adapted for photosynthesis, a gas exchange, limiting water loss and transporting water and sugars. Okay, so we talked about this in our previous section, but this is something we knew that we will be learning is that describing the diagrams of it. So we have cuddle, upper epidermis, xylem, phloem, it looks around as you can see, guard cells, stomata. Okay, and here I've listed some leaf structure and types of leaf structures. So there's simple leaves, which is undivided blade per petiole. Compound leaves, okay, one blade per petiole, as you guys can see. Now stomatas are basically the pores in the epidermis, and cuddle is the waterproof covering that helps plant conserve water. And we also have cuddle over us. We can cuddle is basically something that protects you. We can think of that as a skin, okay? And there is pores in our skin, which basically is the guard cells, which helps us not to get infected that fast. Okay. Most plants have leaves with two layers of mesophyll. So the first layer is called palisade layer, which lies beneath the upper epidermis, and this is the site of most photosynthesis. The second layer is spongy layer, which basically lies between the palisade layer and the lower epidermis. Now leaves is basically the mesophyll is where most photosynthesis occurs in leaves, like we just learned. It is also the ground tissue composed of chloroplasts, rich perineal cells, and all leaves contains vascular tissues. The vascular bundles in leaves are called vein. Okay, and transport water and food. So veins are separated from the mesophyll by the layer of cells called the bundle cell. Now, as you guys can see, I've demonstrated this with a diagram over here. So here's some function. You guys can pause it and read it by yourself. And that's it for this presentation. So what I want you guys to do is basically there's a Facebook page that I want you to click the like button. It really helps me out a lot. Thank you for watching.